Welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Maureen Martin, and I am the program's Continuum Coordinator for Can-Do Multiple Sclerosis. Thank you for acting on the belief that you are more than your MS by attending tonight's webinar, Get Back on Track, Keep Your Motivation Alive with Dr. David Engstrom. I want to start tonight's presentation by talking a little bit about Can-Do Multiple Sclerosis. Can-Do MS is an innovative provider of lifestyle empowerment programs for people with MS and their support partners. We are the start of a whole new way of thinking about and living with MS. A national nonprofit organization, we empower people to move beyond their MS by giving them the knowledge, skills, tools, and confidence to adopt healthy lifestyle behaviors, actively co-manage their disease, and live their best lives. Our renowned programs have helped thousands of people with MS reclaim their dignity, control, and freedom, and transform their challenges into possibilities. Can-Do MS launched our new website last summer, mscando.org. Please visit the website where you can register for upcoming webinars, listen to our archived webinars, check out our upcoming Can-Do MS lifestyle empowerment programs, share your Can-Do promise, and learn ways you can contribute to or get involved with Can-Do MS. A few housekeeping items before we get started. Dr. Engstrom will answer questions at the end of the presentation, and we encourage questions throughout his presentation. So to ask a question, you type in your question in the chat feature located on the left side of your computer screen. So you should see a box on the left side of your computer screen that says chat. So to submit a question, just type in the small box that says chat with presenters. Dr. Engstrom will address as many questions as time will allow at the end of his presentation. This presentation is being recorded and it will be archived on Can-Do MS's website. You're more than welcome to view the presentation again, and if you missed one of our other webinars, you can find the archived version on the website as well. For those of you who are attending live tonight, you will receive an email tomorrow with copies of this PowerPoint presentation. You all should have downloaded the motivation handout that was in your confirmation and reminder emails. If you haven't downloaded the handout, please do so now. And you can find the handout in your webinar confirmation email that you received when you registered and the reminder email that was sent out yesterday. You would have had to just have this email open to connect to the webinar. On the right-hand side of the email, you will see downloadable files, and under that you'll see motivation handout. You can just click on that and it should open up on your computer. If you are unable to download the document, you can still participate and answer the questions by writing the answers on a blank piece of paper. Dr. Engstrom will go through the handout throughout his presentation tonight. And lastly, as many of you discovered when you logged into the webinar, new in 2011, you can listen to the live webinar through your computer speakers rather than having to call in. So the job of the live participants tonight is to, number one, submit your questions in the chat box. Number two, complete the evaluation at the end of the webinar. And number three, review the webinar schedule and register for the upcoming webinars. So we have a great speaker lined up for tonight's presentation. Dr. David Engstrom is a licensed clinical psychologist with private offices in Scottsdale, Arizona. He is an affiliate medical staff member of Scottsdale Healthcare Shea and works closely with Scottsdale Bariatric Center. Born in Chicago, he is a graduate of the George Washington University. He received his Ph.D. in clinical psychology at the University of Southern California and served his internship at the Los Angeles County U.S.C. Medical Center. Dr. Engstrom is a diplomat of the American Board of Professional Psychology and a fellow in the American Academy of Clinical Psychology. Dr. Engstrom's primary interests in health psychology include weight management, addictive behaviors, behavioral treatment of insomnia, motivation to change health behaviors, and stress management. He's published numerous articles in professional journals and has produced audio programs on these subjects. Welcome, David Engstrom. Before we get started tonight, let's do a quick survey to see who's on the webinar with us today. So I just put a survey up on the screen, and we're asking if you are a person living with MS, a support partner, a healthcare provider, or other. We'll wait just a couple seconds, let everyone have time to answer this poll. All right, it looks like we have about 95% is the person living with MS, 10% support partner, 5% healthcare professional, about 5% other. So that's a great group we have on the call tonight. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Engstrom.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and I want to welcome all of you. I'm so glad you had this chance to have this little chat because I think this subject is a very personal one to all of us. And that's the idea of how you actually keep motivation going in your life. By the way, I am curious about who the two others are, but I probably never will learn that. I don't know who an other would be here, but glad to see you all anyway. I've done a lot of work in the past 5 or so years and research as well on motivation. And some of the material I'm going to share with you tonight is about data that we got directly from the Can-Do MS program, so we'll be presenting that as well. Because everybody has to always have a cartoon, this is one of my very favorites. To handle your recliner, the handle on your recliner does not qualify as an exercise machine. Laugh track right there. A little bit of history on the Can-Do program. I've been with Can-Do for over 15 years now, and I remember back in the day when it started, and it started because of a particular athlete named Jimmy Huga, who you've probably all heard his name before, but it really started as an exercise-based program because there was some research done with people at our center that found that exercise, in fact, helps people with symptoms of MS. And right now we have a number of programs, and I'm sure you'll get material from Maureen and others about the programs, but the one I'm going to talk about a little bit is our longer program called Can-Do, which is an intensive 5-day group setting that's been held all over the country as well as in Canada. And it's a comprehensive program where when you go there, you're subject to all sorts of individual evaluations by experts in the field, from neurology to urology to cardiology to psychology to speech and language and occupational and physical therapy as well. And by the time you leave the program, you leave with a really good assessment of what your goals are that you need to achieve and how to make better achievement of them. We found in working with people who go through the 5-day program that they come out of the program verbalizing a very strong motivation, not only to exercise, but sort of an excitement in general about getting started after the program is finished. That is, getting out and starting their exercise prescriptions and other things. So I think it's important to remember that this program produces a level of motivation that we weren't very good at explaining. The big questions that were left to us were, number one, what are the things that motivate folks? Here are people with MS or support partners that come into a 5-day program and end up being much more motivated than beforehand. What are the things that motivate them? Could this be just what we call a modeling effect in psychology? Could it be something where if you're around other people who are interested in physical exercise, does it make you kind of get contagious and pick some of that up? We don't know how long the motivation lasts or why it lasts. So those are the big questions we tried to answer. Remember, too, that the main goal of Can-Do is to establish a positive cycle of achievement where every achievement you make leads to higher goals, better performance, and enhanced self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a term that we use in psychology a lot that simply means that your attitude changes so that you feel that you're more likely to accomplish things you weren't sure you were going to accomplish before. Now I'm going to bore you with just a couple of slides of data because we did some very interesting research about 6 years ago with people who go through our 5-day program, and I want to share just a couple of bar graphs with you. There are different types of motivation, and you can probably imagine this in your own life. Some people get motivated because of things like fitness. They want to be more physically fit, or they want to have better physical appearance. They want to become more competitive with other people. They want to develop better social relationships, and they want to enjoy life and their motivations better. This is a slide that shows differences in measured motivation from people before they went through the 5-day program to about 4 to 6 months after. So the light blue bars show the before program attitudes, and the dark blue bars, or kind of indigo bars, show the after program attitudes. I want to pay special attention to enjoyment. Look at the way enjoyment of exercise increased after this program. And look at the way that the social dynamic of exercise increased. You'll probably notice, too, that appearance didn't increase very much, but physical fitness increased as well, too. So the next question we wanted to ask was, What does this have to do with different sources of motivation? If you think about your own life and the ways you get motivated, usually they come from one of these four areas. There are things that are externally motivated. Your doctor tells you you have poor cardiovascular fitness and you need to do more exercise. That's something coming from outside of you. Or your spouse tells you you need to do more exercise. That's external motivation. Introjected is sort of a fancy psychological word, which really means if I didn't do this, I would feel guilty. I would feel badly about myself if I didn't exercise, fill in the blanks. The next and most strong determinants of motivation are identified and intrinsic. Identified motivation is sort of that health club effect. If you like to go to a gym and you meet people there and you get to know them and you see that they're working out and they're exercising, you want to be like them. That's identified. And the last one, and the most powerful by far, is what we call intrinsic or internal motivation. That's where you want to do things just because of you and because they're fun. So that's the most important part. The more likely they are to succeed in succeeding order, intrinsic and identified are on the top. My last little sciencey slide here. We also wanted to look at the dynamics of what motivation was taking place, again, before and after the program. So again, the light blue bars are before, the dark or indigo bars are after. Look at the difference in identified motivation. That is the strongest determinant. Apparently people developed motivation because they wanted to be like other people around them. And also you'll notice that intrinsic motivation increased. That is, people said, I want to do this because I enjoy it, because it's a challenge. And we love that word challenge, because it's fun. On the other hand, external motivation decreased significantly. That is, people who began to change their behavior after the program did so much less because other people were pushing them into that change. So with that as a background, think about this. How many times have you set a goal for yourself and never even started? Or to put it another way, how many times have you set your goal, started up, and then never even followed through with your plans? You know, I sort of view this as the New Year's resolution effect. And for those of you who are over about 35 years old, I'm sure you can appreciate this. Generally, people, once they get past about 35, stop making New Year's resolutions. And the reason is exactly what I'm stating here, because we can set a goal and we never even accomplish it. Why is that? Why do we fall down so much to the point where most people in the U.S. who are over 35 or 40 don't even bother setting resolutions anymore? Well, here are a couple of reasons. Number one, we're looking at goals that are hard to achieve, and very often when we set our goals, we set them too big. They're too gigantic to ever accomplish. Running the New York City Marathon next November, for instance. They're too complicated. Sometimes the goals we set are, I'm going to feel better about myself, I'm going to get a new job, I'm going to help my exercise, and I'm going to change my diet. Often our goals are too vague. We set vague goals sometimes and goals that aren't very specific. And most importantly, I'm going to stress this a little bit in my talk tonight, we set goals sometimes that are not time-based, and basing your goals on time is incredibly important. Well, what I want you to do, and here's your work tonight. I hope some of you have printed out that sheet, that handout, because I'm going to have you fill that out as we go along. And even if you miss some of this, remember all this material is going to be available to you on our website, so you can always go back and review every slide and every word that I say. But if you have the sheet in front of you, I want you to think about tonight where you need the most help. Right now, as you sit here tonight, what's the primary area of wellness where you need the most help? Here are some great choices. Exercise. I'm not feeling motivated to exercise. I don't have a good exercise plan. Maybe you need more help on diet. You know, that's one of the reasons we have dietitians in our program. Diet is a very important thing. Maybe you need help in adherence to your medication regimen. Maybe stress management. We teach a lot of stress management, and we have some good audios available for you folks who want to learn more about stress. Maybe your area is spirituality. That's such a very complex area in our lives, which some people really haven't come to grips with. Or lastly, maybe your area is what you do the rest of your life, fun, leisure activities. Pick one of these right now, and in column or in row one, after Question 1, write down what goal is most important to you right now. What big goal? This shouldn't be more than 3 or 4, maybe 5 words at the most. Just quickly write down either one of these goals or something that I haven't mentioned that you might think of as a major goal you want to work on tonight. And remember, time is not going to be pressured here, so you can always go back and fill this out later. You should have figured out one goal now, so let's move on. It's important to understand definitions. There's a tremendous difference between a goal and a plan. A goal is the New Year's resolution. That's where you want to go. Lose 60 pounds. Learn to run a marathon. Those are big, giant goals. A plan is really much more about how you get there. That's the little roadmap that tells you how you're going to get there, and that's what we're going to try to focus on tonight. And the last definition is mindfulness. It's a word that maybe you've heard before, maybe not, but it's really just about being present. When you're mindful, you take those 2 or 3 or 4 minutes every day to just be still and to be present, to be focused on the now. That's the time I want you to be setting up not only the big goal, but the plan. So just now, I want to describe a little quiz for you that's based on some really good research that's been done. Think about how ready you are to change right now. What is your degree of readiness to change? And I'm going to give you 5 choices. Number 1, I haven't even thought about change. Now, I don't imagine any of you are in that category right now because you wouldn't even be attending this webinar if you weren't thinking about it. I'm thinking about change, but I'm not sure about it. I know I need to make changes, but I want to have a definite plan. I have a plan and want to get started. And 5, I'm already working on my plan and want to continue my commitment to it. My guess is most of you are in columns 3, 4, or 5 at this point. So here are some interesting results. A couple of psychologists back east developed this around the way we all change behaviors. What we find when all of us contemplate behavior change is we go through 5 different stages of change. They start with what we call pre-contemplation. That is people who aren't even thinking about it yet. They're not ready for change, and the main state of mind is, I'm never going to make that change very much. Number 2 is contemplation. That's when you're starting to think about things, but you don't quite know how to do it. Someday you might. Number 3 is preparation. You need help developing a plan because you're getting ready and you know you want to make this change soon. Number 4 is action. That's where you're ready to move, but you might need help getting started. And number 5 is maintenance. That's when you've already started to change this behavior, but you need help in keeping your motivation alive. That's the forever part. So in item number 2, I just want you to make a little check mark as to how ready you are for change right now tonight. And obviously the ones that are hardest to make the jumps from are from contemplation, which is number 2, to preparation, preparation to action, and then the really tough one is we're all pretty good at getting started with things, but it's harder to keep them going, to go to number 5, which is maintenance. So be honest with yourself and make a check mark right now. The rest of this talk is going to be based around a system that I developed called P.A.U.S.E. And P.A.U.S.E is simply a nice little abbreviation for planning your strategy, accounting for changes, understanding the barriers that might occur, slowing your pace, and exercising your options. So we're going to frame the rest of this talk around P.A.U.S.E. Think about planning. There's tremendous power in our planning things, and most of us don't do it. If you think about the way most of us lead our lives, we might plan a couple of things every day, but for the most part, we just kind of let things fall as they may, and we go through life without making very definite plans. The fact is, when we make large plans, like remember I was talking earlier about goals, those big things in the sky, what they do to our brain is they make us fearful. They make us anxious, and we aren't as likely to follow through. What I want you to try to do tonight, and part of the purpose of this talk, is to get you to trick your brain a little bit by making really nice, small, and simple plans. Those are the ones that are safe, and we're going to help you to get there as we go along. Remember, everybody has a brain that is programmed to resist change. Our brains are very contented if we go along doing the same thing today that we did yesterday and the same thing tomorrow that we did today. What you need to do is intervene in that brain by starting to take very small steps, because when you do, you actually bypass the anxiety, the fear we all have, or what we call the fight or flight response, where you sort of suddenly give up because you get so anxious that you're not going to accomplish that big goal that you pretty much put it at rest. What this really seems to do, and there's some interesting neurological work on this, is it creates new connections in your brain so that it works with you in the process of making that nice gradual change yourself. So armed with that, what I've just said, what I want you to do in item number 3 on your handout is to first of all restate your goal. Again, that goal ought to be 2 or 3 or 4 words, very brief. Do that now. And once that's finished, take a little bit more time and write down what's the first small plan that you can initiate tomorrow or the next day that's going to work toward your goal. If your goal is exercise, the first small plan might be to join a health club. It might be to buy a pedometer. We'll talk more about keeping track of things later. Something little. Buy a new pair of walking shoes. Figure out something that you can do that is manageable tomorrow or the next day. Forget about the big stuff. And the plan ought to be probably 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. I don't want a dissertation here. Just enough to give you a little memory jog of what that first plan is that you wrote tonight. Remember, we're talking about that primary area of wellness that you need to work in. One of my favorite quotes actually comes from Woody Allen. I'm sure most of you have seen this already, but I found in my life that this is absolutely true. 90% of success is showing up. And the more you believe that, it's showing up at the gym. It's showing up on the walking path. It's showing up to plan your meals for the next day. It's showing up to listen to audios that will help you with stress management. A lot of success is just based on showing up, because you know what people do who aren't successful? They stop showing up. They get a little discouraged and stop. Now we come to the A in the P.A.U.S. system, which is accounting for changes. Basically, that means self-monitoring, and I can't stress the importance of this. There have been a lot of studies done in behavioral psychology that show very clearly that people who write things down change their behavior. A very quick example, a couple of psychologists did a study on smoking. And what they did was they took 2 groups of people who were trying to stop smoking. One of the groups of people received a medication that was supposed to help them to stop smoking. The other group was just told to write down every time you smoke a cigarette, just record that on a little index card. Keep track of the number of cigarettes you smoke. You know what happened? The people who did nothing more than self-monitor reduced their smoking by over 80%. Self-monitoring changes behavior. Writing things down and knowing what's changing is really important. So you want to select things that are likely to change, the small things, because it makes you aware of some of the small changes that you might make in everyday life that ordinarily we forget. So here's your next challenge. In item number 4, what is your method for tracking changes? How are you going to account for changes? I want you to reflect on this for just a minute. Some of you, I can't obviously ask for a show of hands here, but some of you might keep a journal. People don't keep journals as much as they used to, but you know, they were wonderful methods for sort of having a record of what you do every day. Most of us don't have records of that at all. So if you're one of those people that keeps a journal every day, God bless you. We need more of you. Maybe you want to develop a little behavior log around the thing that you're working on. It might be reducing the number of calories that you eat each day, or it might be increasing the number of steps that you take each day. So you might, let's say you're going to work on steps. Maybe you go out and go to Walmart or Target and buy a $10 pedometer, just a simple step pedometer, and record each night when you take the pedometer off how many steps you took that day. Or your behavior log might be around adherence with your medication. Keep track of what you've done each day. Or if you're sophisticated and like computers, we've had a lot of people that have put this on either their Outlook or maybe even developed an Excel spreadsheet so they can record the things in their life. Remember the things that are more likely to change. You don't want to look at things that are far-fetches. You want to look at things that are much more likely. So right now, in 3 or 4 words, I want you to commit to the method you're going to use. And you know, it could be as simple as carrying around an index card each day in your purse or your shirt pocket and just making a mark on there every time you do that behavior you're monitoring. Or it might be as sophisticated as a computer program. What is your method for tracking changes? Now we get into the biggest part. That's understanding your barriers. There are external barriers, internal barriers, what I call brain chatter, and time traps, and we're going to discuss each of those in order. External barriers can be things like that you've simply never had any training in how to plan things. That's probably true of a lot of people. No training. Another big external barrier to accomplishing behavior goals might be changes in your life. Death of a loved one, divorce, unemployment, having a kid go off to college. These are all changes that can throw us off our path very easily. They are life changes that can make you demotivated, if you will. Another external barrier is maybe you don't agree with the person who set the goal. You know, a great example is we've had patients referred who've been referred to us by the person's doctor. The person who's going through the program doesn't really agree with what the doctor wants, but the doctor wants them to lose weight, to get their blood sugars down, whatever that is. And maybe you have a disagreement with the person setting the goals. That's why you've got to be the one who sets the goals. Or it might be negative feedback from others. Gee, I could give you 100 examples here, but maybe you're in a family that doesn't exercise. And maybe those people in the family have seen you try to do this 100 times, and they're going to say each time, I've seen you do that. I know you're not going to succeed. You may as well quit now. Think right now about whether you have any of these external barriers. Some of you probably don't, and that's fine. But have you undergone any major life changes lately in your life, things that have happened to you? Have you run into disagreements with the goal setter? Have you had negative feedback from other people? Just kind of quickly write down any barrier that you might think about. Internal barriers. These are bigger. No plans. A lot of people just don't have plans. As I said before, a lot of people randomly bounce through every day without really developing a plan for themselves every day. The next 2 items are sort of the same, and what it is that sort of idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We all have established behaviors, long-term behaviors in our lives. Maybe it's sitting and watching television for 4.5 hours every evening. Maybe it's something to do with diet. But we resist changing these things because there's tremendous fear of new things that are going to happen. We all have this reluctance to change for that reason. That's a strong internal barrier. Look at your attitudes about that. And the last one on my short list is just the whole area of psychological distress. Many people who come to our program suffer from depression, and some from anxiety as well. Everybody here, including myself, knows that when you're under distress for a period of time, the last thing you want to think about is the goal you've set and the plan you're undergoing. So look at that and try to figure out a way around that. I hope you're all coping with that, and I would like to put in a little pitch here that if you're suffering from depression or anxiety or other psychological symptoms, that you'll get help from a psychologist, from a psychiatrist. There are so many around right now who understand MS and understand how to deal with symptoms of it, when to use medication, when psychotherapy is important. What are your internal barriers? This should be just a few words, but have you got anxiety about changing? Have you got distress from depression, maybe about thinking about your future? We'll talk about that in a minute. Write down your internal barriers. From this list are other things you think about under 5B. I don't know if Abe Lincoln really said this, but I love the quote. Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. I think that's just simple old wisdom, but isn't it sort of true? Haven't you met people in your life who seem to develop the determination to stay sad or to stay depressed or to stay angry? It's really important to examine some of those emotional things, which I call brain chatter, because I think the way we chatter in our brain is what produces those sorts of negative emotions. And I've listed just 5 here. There are many more, but these are 5 that are very common. I see them all the time. Our chatter might be about rehashing the past. Have you ever known people in your life who never really get out of the past? They may have had abuse as a child, or they may have had a bad experience. Somebody cheated them out of a lot of money, or perhaps they had a very nasty divorce, and they live back there in the past. When you talk to that person, it feels like they never really reach the present because they're always in the past. People are often rehashing the past. All or nothing thinking. That's another classic one, right? And it's classic especially among those of us who are perfectionists, where you're either going to do a job 100% or you've totally failed. It's that sort of black and white thinking where you never see any shades of gray. Everything is either a complete success or a complete failure. That can lead to very negative emotions as well. Disqualifying the positive, another great example. How many times have you gone through a day where perhaps 95%, maybe 99% of what you do that day is absolutely perfect? You're on your program, you're doing everything right. But maybe you do one little thing wrong. You eat the wrong thing. You don't practice your exercise. Maybe you walk into a room and stumble over the carpet as you walk in. And what's the one thing you remember from that day? Is that one negative thing. And you eliminate all the positive things in your life. You disqualify the positive. Another kind of brain chatter is labeling, and we all label ourselves and we label each other as well. Probably the most classic label, especially relative to exercise, is I'm a couch potato, right? How many times do we say that? I'm just a couch potato. I don't have any willpower. I don't have any control when I'm around a tray of chocolate brownies. We all label in some ways. And the last one, which is my favorite because I must admit I do it a bit, is misfortune telling. Misfortune telling is really looking into the future rather than the past and always predicting negative events. Usually when we misfortune tell, do you know what every sentence begins with is what if? What if my MS symptoms get worse? What if I die? What if I get divorced? What if the IRS audits me? We could go on and on with all of our misfortune telling, and that's a lot of what chatter is. A lot of chatter is about either the past, when we rehash things that have happened to us, or about the future. And you know what we leave out is the present, and that's what we're going to talk about in a couple of slides. Do you recognize yourself here? In 5C, why don't you just, in 2 words or more, write down what your brain chatter is. What's your particular brand of brain chatter? Oprah says, breathe, let go, and remind yourself that this very moment is the only one you know you have for sure. And how true that is. How true, related to my last slide about rehashing the past and misfortune telling. How do we know when we're really in the present? Well, when we're in the present, we get out of what I call time traps. You know, all of us lead life that feels fast, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that people's time perception has really picked up in the past 30 or 40 years because of computers, because of TiVos, because of all sorts of things in our lives. We tend to accelerate things and stay in the fast lane. You know what that leaves is no time for the present moment. And it's sort of like being on automatic pilot all day. Have you ever driven down a stretch of highway in your town, wherever you live, and you may have traveled 15 or 20 miles, and you get to your destination and you realize you haven't seen one thing along the side of the road? I've done that, and I'm sure many of you have too. That's being on automatic pilot. We're not really focusing on what our experience is at the moment because we've got this destination. What are your time traps in 5D? What are your time traps? Are you constantly speeded up and not having time to get things done? Do you feel like you never have time for the present moment? Again, this should be no more than 3 or 4 words. So here's your homework. There's no time in 50 minutes to do this tonight, but on 5E, what I want you to do is look back at the things you've written down under external, internal, brain chatter, and time trap barriers, and try to figure out some way to overcome these barriers. And this is going to take a little bit of work, but believe me, each time you eliminate one little part of a barrier and get it out of the way, you're going to be that much closer to accomplishing your goal ultimately. A quick quiz. You can do this later if you want to because the scoring's all in here, but I have 5 questions. Listen to the questions. Number 1, I have trouble following through with my plans because other things seem to get in the way. Answer that and rate that in terms of 1, which would be always, 2, which would be usually, 3, sometimes, and 4, never. Question number 2, I can only stay motivated if other people pressure me to do it. 1, always, are you always that way? 2, are you usually that way? 3, sometimes, and 4, never. Item number 3, I like to achieve my goals because I just enjoy the accomplishment. 1, always, 2, usually, 3, sometimes, and 4, never. Just rate these. Number 4, I feel like a failure every time I don't follow through with my plans. 1, always, 2, usually, 3, sometimes, and 4, never. And lastly, I keep putting off things I need to do to stay healthy. Always, usually, sometimes, or never. Now here's something you can do after you've got all 5 numbers written down. Here's the formula. What you want to do is add the scores for items 1, 2, 4, and 5. And you can do this later. There's no rush. You can always come back and look at the slides. And then subtract the score from item 3. So you've got 1, 2, 4, and 5. You accumulate those scores and then subtract number 3. The higher your score, the more self-motivated you tend to be. So if you come out, and don't have to do this now, 11 down to 8, you probably need a bit of help. If you're 7 to 0, you definitely need help. What we want is to see scores between 15 and 12. Those show real significant self-motivation. So if you don't have time to do this now, you can always do this analysis later. Pause, P-A-U, and now we're down to S, slow your pace. One of the things we teach and really believe in at the Can-Do programs is the idea of learning good relaxation. Relaxation exercises are important to practice every day. We do have audio programs available to you because you know the more you can slow things down, the more you're going to be relaxed. And muscle relaxation is an excellent one, where you tighten and then gradually let go of different muscles. Or if you're more comfortable doing it by just passively letting go, that's fine too. If you're good at imagining things, visual imagery works great, and breathing exercises are some of the simplest ways. And what I have people do when they get into practicing this goal setting and planning is to do a simple mindfulness exercise where they find an anchor. And you know what anchor I like to use? I like to just lightly touch my thumb and forefinger together very lightly on my dominant hand, my right hand. Every time I feel like I'm mindful and in the moment, I just let those touch and I focus on what I can control now. I will just tell you that the way I do this is to take a little bit of time each day, and I mean literally 5 minutes. I usually do it in the morning because I'm fresher in the morning, and what I do is either sit down or lie down and close my eyes and take a couple of nice slow breaths, and then I try to be in the moment. And that's something you can learn if you kind of let all the brain chatter drain out of your head. Just kind of let it go and come back to something you can focus on. Maybe the sounds in the room around you, and try not to listen to those sounds, but just to hear them. And once you get in the moment, try to reaffirm your plans to yourself. Go back over the simple plan. What do I need to do today? Don't worry about tomorrow, but worry about today. Just try to focus very clearly on it. And then when you get clear on that plan, lightly touch your thumb to your index finger very lightly and just visualize yourself carrying that plan out. Just visualize yourself getting through that plan during the day. The last of pause is exercise your option. We already have gone through some of this, but one of it is, where do you want to start? We already have identified that, because in item number 1, you chose an area of your life in which you want to start. When do you want to start? Exact time and date. That's very important, to pin yourself down, make yourself accountable. What's your specific plan? That is, what are you going to do exactly? You've already written that. That's item number 2. And how are you going to keep track of your progress? What form are you going to use to account for those changes you make? So the important message I want to leave you with is, to get motivation, you've got to do something. I mean, there's so much evidence that shows that it's only when we change behavior a little bit that motivation develops. You can't sit on a couch and get motivated. You've got to make some little change in your life. And remember the part about small and simple. I respect people who can identify really little changes. If you don't want to walk in the morning, put both your walking shoes right against your front door so you got to knock them down when you open the door. Little stuff like that. Because remember the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? I'm sure you've all heard it, one bite at a time. And that's what I want you to do. Behavior change is a big elephant. It's a giant elephant to make a plan out of a goal. And rituals are important too. I know in my life I like to use exercise as an example, because I'm not the biggest fan of exercise, but I know I got to do it for my health, so I've developed a little ritual, something that I do without voting. Because you mostly know, I'm sure, what happens when we vote on exercise. You know which side usually wins, right? So you don't want to vote on things like that. You just want to make it a ritual and make your plans and goals realistic, measurable, and short-term. So in summing up, number 7 is where you're going to develop your new plan. You've got to restate your goal area. Go back to number 1. What was your goal? Then you've got to commit yourself. Starting on Tuesday, February 11th at 11 in the morning, I will call my friend and take a walk. What barriers am I likely to? Now, this is where you kind of get into analyzing your barriers. What barriers am I likely to overcome or to come into at this point? Maybe your friend won't be home. Maybe it's raining that day. Maybe you're feeling too sad or depressed to want to walk. You've got to figure out ways to cope with that. There are answers to every single one of these. You know, you could be a lone exerciser. You could carry an umbrella with you. If you feel too sad to get going initially, maybe you need to work a little bit with a therapist. There might be ways to do this. How am I going to cope with those, and how am I going to track my daily progress? That's the importance of developing your new plan. Just want to leave you with a couple of nice, healthy attitudes, because I think attitude is the most important part of motivation. 1, self-efficacy. We believe strongly in that at CanDo. And we think that when people go through our program, they develop higher levels of expectation for what they can do, that they can set a goal, make a plan, and actually follow through with it. Second on my list is always optimism. You might have been familiar with some of the books that have been written, but Martin Seligman has written an interesting book on learned optimism. You know, some people in this world always seem to view the glass as half empty, and what Seligman says in his book is that you can teach people to be more optimistic. There are a lot of research studies that show that optimism produces very positive health outcomes, especially in areas like as diverse as heart disease and even cancer progression. Number 3, forgiveness. You know, forgiveness to me is sort of the opposite of anger. I didn't know any other word to put in it, but anger, it turns out, is one of the most destructive emotions we can hold on to. And I always use people as an example of forgiveness. You know what sticks out in my mind always? If you remember back years ago when that man broke into a schoolhouse in the Amish country and shot all those school kids, and you know those Amish folks actually took up a fund for his family and took it to him, and I have always thought that's a model for forgiveness. Or think about somebody like Nelson Mandela. I mean, there are people you can model yourself after, because letting go of anger is incredibly important. A sense of humor, not only about jokes in the funny papers, but about yourself. I mean, I always think that people who can laugh at themselves and see the silliness basically in life, very important attitude. And lastly, I want to emphasize a sense of purpose. We all need that. You need to know what you're here for and where you're going. I don't care what kind of disability you have. I don't care what challenges MS is putting in front of you. You got to have a sense of purpose. I think among these 5, if you can pick out 1 or 2 that you need to work on for the next 6 months, work on them. Write it down. Make little stickies and hang them on the refrigerator. I think you'll be much better off for it. So I leave you with that, and I just want to say for my last slide a final thank you. I really appreciate your all being here tonight, and now maybe we can go to Maureen and have some questions that might have been asked during this period of time. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks, Dr. Engstrom. Yes, we have a few questions, and one we'll just quickly answer because I'm sure other people have the question. Can you give the author's name and title again of the book you just mentioned?
Absolutely. He is actually a psychologist, and he was president of the American Psychological Association. Very bright man. His name is Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N, last name S-E-L-I-G-M-A-N, Seligman, Ph.D., and the title of the book is Learned Optimism, and I'm sure you can find it on Amazon very easily. It's been out for a number of years now. But it's an interesting book because it gets into how you actually accommodate optimism in your life.
That's great. So you gave some people the homework of how to overcome barriers, and there are a couple of questions about, if you have any suggestions. Some people think that their barriers just seem too big to handle. So any suggestions you have to overcoming those barriers?
That's always a tough one. It sort of depends, but I think for the internal barriers, the ones that come from inside you, you got to get some kind of help from a counselor, from a therapist, from a family member, from somebody in the ministry. It really doesn't matter where it comes from. You've got to have somebody help you to get beyond the internal barriers. The external ones can be tough. I mean, a lot of people don't have money to join a gym, right? That's an external barrier, and there isn't much you can do about that except figure out alternative ways of getting around it. So the external ones are tougher. In terms of brain chatter, oh my, there are so many ways. I mean, most of the things I talked about that are brain chatter are part of what's called cognitive behavior therapy. And if you would like some references, I can tell you one great book that's been a bestseller for many years on this that's a nice simple one to read, and it's a simple title. It's called Feeling Good, and it's written by a psychiatrist named David Burns, B-U-R-N-S, M-D. It was a bestseller for many years. I know it's very cheap in paperback right now, and I think that that's a really important area to get into, because if your brain is chattering, if you're telling yourself, I can't do this, I don't feel like I'm going to be able to achieve it, if you're constantly living in the past or anticipating future things that may not happen, that would be a really good read for you. That's about all I can think of.
That's good. And this just sort of piggybacks on that. This person had a pretty low score on the motivation quiz, and you suggested that they needed to seek some sort of help and assistance. What kind of help are you talking about?
Good therapy can sometimes help. Most every larger city, not the very small ones, but at least some of the larger cities, do have motivational therapists. They have life coaches. They have people that can help you to kind of get back on track a little bit. I mean, a score of 7, sure, that's tough, but you might want to look back at the questions that got you to that score and try to figure out which are the things in there that you might be able to work on first. Are you somebody who isn't doing enough things yourself? Are you just getting discouraged and not following through? There are a lot of things you can do in that regard.
That's great. Here's a good question. You mentioned some relaxation audio tapes. Where can someone purchase those?
Well, one thing we can start with is a colleague of mine named Jude Meyer, who is another psychologist at the Can-Do program. She and I made an audio that's available through Can-Do. And I'm sure you can email or write or call and get a copy of that sent. I think they're relatively inexpensive. I also have some audios if you want to get in contact with me. But what I'd stick with there, if you want to learn good relaxation, stay away from all the ones that feature music and ocean sounds. Try to find ones that use words, because that's what we carry around. when you're driving somewhere, when you're out of town, what you're going to remember are the words that you learned rather than the ocean sounds. So that's my only advice. And don't go with the self-hypnosis tapes. They usually don't work very well.
That's great.
Maureen, do you know, is that audio still available through the center?
It is, yes.
Okay, good.
Yep,
I hope I wasn't misspeaking.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, you can just contact us here at P.A.U.S E, and
Perfect.
we will figure it out.
Good.
Another question, and this is interesting, what about others objecting to the personal time that's taken out for fitness if that's someone's goal?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if the others that person is talking about are relatives or spouses or people like that, there's got to be a clear explanation that part of my challenge with MS is getting this time available to me. Now, I'm assuming that person's not totally overdoing it. I mean, if you're at the gym for 6 hours a day, maybe I can understand. But you got to have that time, and you've got to make time in your life. That's where being assertive is so incredibly important. With people, including a spouse, a family member, you've got to say, look, to get better, I need this time, and you've got to afford me that time. And you know, it's interesting you bring that up because that's one of the things we often cover in the programs that we do. You know, the Long Can Do program, the 5-day one, we have a separate group for support partners. And those are people who might get in there and voice resistance to all the time that the person exercises. And we can redirect them. We can help them with that in a lot of different ways. So that's important stuff to deal with. And of course, if it's in a family, couples therapy is always a good idea too.
That's good. We have a couple more questions. One asks, is it common thought or belief that your brain is programmed to resist change, as you mentioned in one of your earlier slides?
Is it a common belief?
Yes.
Is that the question? Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's common among people who've looked at brain research to a great extent because it is true that there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. And when we take in too much change all at the same time, they actually have done very interesting imaging studies on this. The amygdala tends to light up a lot more. It tends to be more activated. The amygdala is where it's the seat of our anxiety and our stress responses. So it's pretty clear that when we get overwhelmed by a plan or an idea, the amygdala lights up, we feel more anxious, and we're going to resist change a lot more.
That's great. And the last question we have time for tonight asks if you can describe the anchoring process again.
The anchoring?
The anchoring when you're talking about...
anchoring. Yes. Sure. You know, that's purely personal. You can pick any anchor. An anchor is just an external way to remind you that you're in this mindful state. The way I do it, when I practice it, is I just take my right thumb and my right index finger, and I'll come very close to having them touch. And then I'll try to go into a state of relaxation. And when I get there, I'll just gradually make my finger come down on my thumb very lightly, just on the pad, enough that I feel it. And that's a way that I feel outside of myself something that's happening inside. That's really all an anchor is. And you can make up your own. It doesn't have to be that.
That's great. So before we wrap up with kind of last remarks, Dr. Engstrom, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to recap on the webinar?
I really don't. This has been a wonderful experience, and I hope some of you have gotten something out of it. I would encourage all of you to look into our other programs because, as you can see on the screen, in fact, right now, we have some really good ones coming up by people I know well. The next one is going to be done by Ann Mullenix, who is an occupational therapist that I've had lots of experience in working with, and she is very skilled at understanding new strategies to take control of your life. So be sure to come to that one on February 8th.
All right. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Engstrom, for your time and your presentation. We had a great turnout. I think it was an excellent presentation. And as he said, we have 2 upcoming programs, one in February and one in March, and they'll continue throughout 2011. You can register for these and the upcoming webinars on our website, mscando.org. And for those of you participating live tonight, as soon as the presentation is over, you will see a survey appear on your computer screen. So please take a moment to complete the survey and help us continue to improve our webinars. We value your feedback and input. So thanks again, and have a great night.
Thank you all very much for attending.